Introducing Returnal. Now I know PlayStation 5 doesn't have that many games, and saying that I think it's important to mention that Sony is currently investing in first-party studios right now. So it's down to smaller and medium devs to make an impact with their games on PlayStation 5 in order to secure a lineage. Let's see if that's what Returnal has done. I'm happy to be reviewing it, and it's made by House Mark. So without further ado, let's get into the review. Let's break it down. To put it bluntly, the graphics on Returnal are phenomenal. Not only are they utilizing the PlayStation 5's hardware, they also have got the development of the code just right. There is little to no loading screens despite having next-gen graphics. I was truly in awe from the get-go. I have been waiting for Sony to approve more games that are not just first-party studio games. Returnal is a great example of that, from its dense world that's filled to the brim with flora and fauna, to the deserts and frozen mountaintops. Heck, you can even travel underwater. And that's not something a lot of games pull off well, but the visual art style lends itself well to the storytelling House Mark is trying to lay out for us. There are key details and small minute facets of the world that are brought to life using the PlayStation 5 hardware, and hats off to House Mark, as this is probably one of the biggest projects they've had yet. It's been so well received already, and there are particular sections in the game which are done in first person, and it really goes to show the attention to detail. Every household object having a realistic and gritty feel, down to the very textures. The light bounces off the items in such a surreal way that it's almost photorealistic. That actually may throw some people off, as the environment is haunting and the tension is palpable in these moments. I was literally on the edge of my seat. Cutting edge graphics had me flabbergasted, and this is coming from a PC gamer, by the way. That's not all. The visual effects from the guns and enemy attacks had me in a neon fireworks show in every fight. Every nuance in combat has been combed through carefully, presenting itself in a slick and sophisticated way. Everything looks astounding, especially the enemy design. Whoever was in charge of the art direction and animation deserves massive recognition. I definitely feel like this is one of the strongest parts of the game. It sets such good precedent for future titles on the PlayStation 5 that I'm truly excited for what upcoming games will be released on this console. Some of my favorite guns include the Electro Pylon Driver, a gun that attaches tethers to enemies, and by using the terrain, you can make complex traps and protection fields, and before you know it, you have a screen filled with webs of red lightning. I love the aesthetic and find myself gravitating towards the gun on every playthrough. It's also worth mentioning that I love the visual aesthetic in combat too, just generally speaking. I find in lots of shooter games you don't really see the enemy animations and the attacks that play out, as they happen so fast. But in Returnal, the bullet hell style game works so well here. I love seeing this colourful euphoria hit my screen as a boss unleashes a barrage of abilities towards me. Overall, an absolutely smashing job on the visuals. As I gently pulled the trigger of my PlayStation 5 controller, I felt the resistance to let me know that I'm firing my gun while zoomed in, highlighting enemy weak points. And in one swift motion, I pressed down fully, unleashing a rail cannon shot from my carbine rifle. A tactile and responsive feeling, making me feel like a killing machine, whether it be gentle vibrations of the controller as raindrops falling delicately onto my visor, or the rhythmic stomping of a boss encounter. I always felt immersed in the combat, and before I knew it, time was flying by. The gameplay loop is satisfying in so many ways. The responsiveness of the combat, the visual aesthetic, the challenging enemies and boss encounters, and the careful but precise infantry management. So let's go into these topics one by one. Firstly, the responsiveness of the combat. Rarely have I ever played a game that made me feel so in tune with the movements of the character. When I press the dash button, the animation happens straight away in a fluid fashion, giving me a brief moment of invulnerability known as an iframe. This allows you to pull off incredible feats such as dashing through massive AoE attacks just as they're about to hit you, or closing the distance for melee combat, giving the opposition a swift slash of your futuristic katana. All of these things happen fluidly, and by the time I finished my entire game, seeing the secret ending, I was so versed at dodging, repositioning, and capitalizing on my opportunities against my opponents. Everything felt so natural by the end of it all. I was almost sad to have moved on to the next game 50 hours later. Second, the visual aesthetic and how it aids the gameplay. There's a lot to unpack here, so bear with me. Every kind of attack has a different color which represent a property that that attack has. For example, red orbs usually represent orbs that you can dodge through, but purple ones you can't dodge past. Blue attacks tend to be homing in attacks that are very aggressive, and how they track you means that you have to wait till the last second to dodge. The confluence of different enemy attacks and visual patterns provide for a very engaging experience. Truly, you have to handle every enemy different, otherwise you get punished. There are godforsaken drones on the third biome that have a rocket salvo that killed me more than once. They are fast, have splash damage and track very aggressively. It took me a while to realize that I can dodge them by dodging into them, which segues into my next point. Despite me saying that colors have different properties, some enemies have completely unique attacks with the same colors as I mentioned earlier. These enemies are usually mini bosses requiring you to learn their individual attack patterns. I highly recommend you studying every move carefully before committing to any attack patterns, and you'll thank me later. And finally, boss encounters. These are incredible, truly a masterful piece of design, each one with their own mechanics, attack patterns, and badass soundtracks. These fights are not only challenging, but also require you to think about how you're building your character as you go along. Let's go into this a little more. Essentially, you are in a procedurally generated world with the exception of certain As you explore, you unlock items that will give you certain modifiers like a faster recharge for your ult ability or a shield every time you pick up a healing item. It's a standard roguelike affair. Where it gets interesting though is through the items that are called malignant. These items give you a powerful buff and debuff to match. Now you can only have 2 malignant debuffs at a time, as inducing any more will cause you to destroy the items you have collected and reduce your maximum health. It's a careful balancing act. As you get into the second act, it becomes even more essential to manage this correctly. I absolutely love this mechanic, and it made me plan exactly what items I wanted. Now the loop is pretty punishing, as you are unable to save and exit, which means that any one run can need 2 to 3 hours to successfully complete. Right now this is my main point of contention. As someone who is used to fast twitch games and can play for hours at a time, it isn't a problem for me, but for others I can see it being exhausting, which also means they have to free up their schedule to play. I don't advocate lowering the difficulty, but I think having a save and exit mechanic would be a nice quality of life change. Returnal doesn't hold your hand when it comes to the story. This is an intentional effort. You are an astronaut, known as a scout, who crashed her ship and is stranded on an alien planet. The planet is incredibly hostile, from infernal flora to lethal laser traps and giant machina. You'll never find yourself short on opportunities to die. The game uses a time loop feature. When you die, you reset the loop, slowly uncovering more of the story as you go along. Depending on how far you go, you may see a lot or a little. In my opinion, these scraps of story where you'll get most of the story content, and the layout of the land, which is heaving with history, almost bursting at the seams. Although you do have to look for it carefully. It's very much like a Souls game in that sense. You get out as much as you put in. Celine, our main character, and her personality is developed through audio logs you find in the game, and these are usually lying on your corpse. It's morbid, but it provides a unique perspective on a perplexing environment. The items you collect serve as a storytelling tool, so keep an eye out for those. In certain first-person sequences, you'll come across these items, revealing another piece of the puzzle, all of which are very detailed thanks to the PS5 and the excellent design work from House Mark. Unpacking the first-person sequences a little more, I really enjoyed the mood they set. The haunting atmosphere made me feel a little nervous at times, I can't lie. And honestly, I don't know how I'm going to play Resident Evil Village. But anyways, back to Returnal. These sequences are limited and are scripted, so make sure you take your time to enjoy the environments, as it will make your journey through Returnal a much more rewarding experience. How does it run? Well, this section will be quite short. It ran incredibly well, and the frantic action never had any slowdown despite there being hundreds of particle effects and boss attacks all at once. I never had any issues with frame drops, and the loading time is near non-existent. I can't help but feel this is Sony's way of flexing its hardware. The visuals are truly stunning, and when combined with such smooth performance, it's hard to fault it. The only thing I encountered was a bug which essentially removes interactivity from all of the objects, which can trap you in a room with no way out. And the only way of restarting or getting out of that room is restarting the whole cycle. Now, this proved pretty game breaking, but I can replicate it. So if you're buying an item and choose to skip the cutscene after the sequence is finished and the screen is transitioning, do not press the button again. Out of the 10 attempts, I managed to replicate it 7 times. So that's something to be aware of. Now, I don't know if the Returnal devs have fixed this in the latest patch. We'll have to find out. Other than that though, the Returnal is an exemplified version of an excellently polished game.
The song. Why are you playing it?
My oh my. As some of you already know, I'm a sucker for good soundtracks, and Returnal definitely has one. From bosses playing a giant organ to heavy synths playing in the background as you tear your way up through this alien planet, there really is a vast variety of sounds and music. The weapons have their own feel too, each giving off their own distinctive sound. I personally really like the carbine as it harkened back to memories of Starship Troopers and Star Trek. I'm totally in love with the way each weapon sounds. Some are punchy, others are subtle, but unlike other games, Returnal does a great job of making each weapon sound and look vastly different, whether it be sizzling electricity, interacting with chitin armor, or the sound of a red-hot katana slashing through soft, fleshy tentacles. These sound effects have been meticulously recorded in order to portray the visceral combat that Returnal has. Whether it be sizzling electricity, interacting with chitin armor, or the sound of a red-hot katana slashing through soft, fleshy tentacles. These sound effects have been meticulously recorded in order to portray the visceral combat that Returnal has. But it's not only the big stuff that matters. How the game sets its tension in a more morbid or haunting scene is also uncanny to some of the best horror and suspense games. The incredulous details in every facet of this game is truly amazing and something to be proud of for Housemarque. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the review. As always, I enjoyed making it. Now, Returnal is one of those games that has set precedent for smaller studios that can succeed with some support from Sony or Microsoft. This game left me gobsmacked. It was totally amazing. It was addictive. It was engaging. I was totally immersed in the story. And for me, I'm going to give this a green light. For those of you who are new to the channel, stick around. On the next slide, I'm going to tell you what that means so you can use it for future reference. Returnal's on PS5 and I hope it's going to come to PC. There are some rumors that there are a couple of PlayStation games that may potentially come to PC. I am praying for such an event. Now guys, if you like the content and you're new to the channel, please like, and if you really love the content, subscribe, because I will be posting a lot of reviews across the summer and going forward. Next up is Resident Evil Village. This is a big deal. I'm excited to play it. I'll be starting tomorrow. This was the Bearded Breakdown, and I'll see you next time. See you later.